Hello and welcome to the Wilson Center. Today we are very pleased to host Mothanna Gharaibeh, former Minister of Digital Economy and Entrepreneurship of Jordan. He is also the former head of Ericsson in Jordan and has spent 15 years in the private sector working across the Middle East. Right now, he is president and CEO of The Fifth. So, Mothanna, we are joining today to talk about the economic impact of the current conflict going on in Gaza, very close to Jordan. Since the conflict began on October 7th, the economic impacts have been wide-ranging across the region. No country is more affected outside of Israel and the Palestinian territories itself, other than Jordan, which has the longest border and ongoing trade relations with both entities. So, Muthanna, thank you very much for joining us here today. First, I would like to ask you a very direct question. What is the most, and what kind of impact has this conflict had on Jordan's economy?
Thank you, Alex, and thanks for the Center for this opportunity. Actually, before I go to the direct impact, I mean, there are things that are beyond the economy. There is emotional, moral, political attachment to what's happening in Gaza and Jordan. And I mean, as to link it to the economy, in the Arab Spring, when Jordanians were demonstrating for their economic prosperity, for job opportunities, or whatever, there was much less people than the people that demonstrated in the last 3 months. So in the last 3 months, it mattered for the people and got people out in Jordan. It created a complete strike for one day, for example, more than their own economy and their own personal interests. So there are things that matter for Jordanians more than economics to start with. But yes, there is an impact on the short term. For example, tourism. Last year, the tourism was around 4.5 to 5 billion Jordanian dinars, which is a huge portion of our economy. We expect that we'll lose almost 2 billion out of that in the next year because of the cancellations. People don't realize that Jordan is a very safe place. It's a very resilient country. And with all what's happening right now, we're living our lives normally, and there is nothing to worry about. But yet, when people try to go to a touristic destination, they look around in the news and they choose somewhere else. There's 200 places on earth they could visit. So we're going to lose a lot of that in the economy. And that's, by the way, if you consider the 2 billion, that could be a 2 billion job. That's around 2.8 billion dollar. That could be 6% of our economy, 6% of GDP. And it's impacting around 50 people that are working in the tourism sector, 50,000 people. So it's bad on the short term, but yet the private sector and the consumers of Jordan have realized that this could be a wake-up call to become more self-sustainable, self-dependable. And they think, I mean, I'm talking to the chambers, to the industry, to everybody. And local business, for example, I mean, Pepsi and Coca-Cola was something that you could never think of living without 3 months ago, 100 days ago. Right now, it's a shame in Jordan. Nobody's consuming Coca-Cola and Pepsi. And local manufacturers have created two local products that took over the market, and that's a huge market. So the economic impact is not limited to Jordan. It's limited to the global suppliers that are from countries that are not aligned with what the moral values that the consumers in Jordan align to. And this is a big story. I mean, and this change can be long term. I mean, I know many people think, this is a short term. I don't want to use the word boycott because boycott can be a sensitive word in different countries, but it's a consumer behavior, which people have the right to decide what to consume and what not to consume. So Jordanians in the last 3 months have decided to move themselves away from what they used to pride themselves with consuming, and now it's considered a shame. And it could be not only economically impacting Jordan, could be impacting the global producers who need to think of that. They're losing not only the 11 million consumers in Jordan, but almost maybe 440 million Arabic consumers and much more in the bigger global south. So yes, we have an impact on tourism, but for example, the local manufacturing share of the market is around 54% before the war. By moving with these consumer trends, by moving only to 60%, that could compensate for the tourism. It's a very simple equation. You could simply produce more, create more jobs. You lose jobs that for fast food restaurants, those franchise, whatever. But there are jobs being created at the small SMEs, local manufacturers or food producers, whatever, that are compensating the loss there. So yes, there's a short-term impact, but it's an opportunity for resilience. And I mean, for COVID, for example, in COVID, we had some losses in the economy, and there was some shortages in the global chemicals, Procter and Gamble, Unilever, Henkel. Those products were not available in the market. Accordingly, the local producers moved their market share from 35% to 70%. And COVID is over, but yet their market share is still at 70%. So it could have a poor impact on the economy in the short term, but on the long term, it's an opportunity for resilience. And that's what I listen to and hear and feel from the Chamber of Industry, for example, who are leading in that context.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point. So in addition to market share from international products being affected, local industry in Jordan is actually compensating for a lot of this effect of consuming less, products from the United States, for example. Is Jordan also turning to its regional neighbors to supply some of those products? What types of consumer products do you think are most affected by the kind of political fallout from purchasing, certain kinds of brands? And are there going to be more linkages being formed across, borders, maybe with Iraq, maybe with Saudi Arabia, in addition to
With
Jordan
Indonesia, Malaysia,
and
India,
and then with the
there,
Pacific?
there
Yeah.
is 500 million Muslim in those countries, and they prefer to have halal food from countries that are morally aligned with. So the consumers of Malaysia and Indonesia would prefer a Jordanian product in cleaning more than Procter and Gamble and Unilever. So there is an opportunity there. And there is a risk also to whoever is taking decisions on the policy level at the US and in the West, because we want to be partners in business and in politics and everything. But the current power balance is not allowing people to partner with them. I mean, simply the cheese. People are consuming Belgian cheese now versus German cheese because Belgium took a more morally understood position for the people of Jordan. That's something that matters. I mean, economics is important, but there are things that matter for the consumers, and those should be taken into consideration. We should not lose a market of 400 million Arabic consumers for one ally.
And talk a little bit more, maybe from the U.S. business perspective. What kind of risk should they be assessing in terms of losing that market share? What is the danger? What is it going to be replaced by? And how can they maintain share um, in order to keep their bottom line in the region?
Well, they're good business people who know how to maintain their market share, but this is beyond their business decisions. It's politics decisions. People, I mean, identity matters. People, for example, people use Apple for the identity, but at a certain point, now people are changing to other models to say no, we're not linked to Apple. I think I don't need to mention certain brands, but the Jordanians are trying to move to Indian Chinese products, and that's a risk for the American businesses. And Jordanians are not alone in this. There are a billion Muslim on earth that are actually using those consumer trends to make a statement. And making that statement should be well heard by the policymakers and the politics leaders in the US, in Europe, wherever, to make sure that they're not losing the whole earth for political bias that has been phased out for a while now.
That's something that business leaders need to pay attention to. They need to be paying attention to the politics. I think that's a very important point to make. And interesting that more of these products are coming from Indonesia and China and India, which are poised to take a lot of that share if they can. I wanted to go back to a previous point you mentioned. You mentioned the strikes. And I wanted to know from you, from your perspective, did it have a significant impact on Jordan's economy? Maybe strikes that were occurring in Jordan or the strikes that occurred in the West Bank. Was there any problem with the flow of goods across borders or with Jordanian businesses that might be active in those areas? Were those strikes primarily maybe they served more of a political role rather than having an economic impact? What were your views on that?
They were a message. I mean, to be honest, a strike for one day doesn't really matter. I mean, the people who consume one day earlier or one day after, if you're going to eat bread and cheese and consume the next day. But it was a very strong message that when there was a call for a strike, everybody took it seriously. The villages in the north or the south of Jordan were on strike as well. That was a big surprise for everybody, including myself. I mean, uh, you wouldn't think that there will be that much commitment to a call that, by the way, nobody knows who came with it. It just became a social media thing that everybody was sharing. And on that day, nobody was working. And that's a very strong message. As I told you, the people who went in the streets in the last 3 months are more than the people who went out in our spring. And the people who went out in our spring were out for economical reasons. Now it's not economic reasons. So our friends and allies needs to think of what matters to our people. Our leadership is clearly understanding that very well in Jordan, and it's in a way we're in alignment with our leadership position on what's happening. But the global international community needs to understand that there are things that matter more.
Right. And then that's an important point that you highlighted that more people over the last 3 months have been demonstrating on the streets than in the entire Arab Spring.
Yep.
So that's an important signal considering even today how much interest the Arab Spring still carries with a lot of policy circles. Um, and going back to the issue of consumer products, we covered a lot of things you mentioned. For example, things like soda or chemicals, things that play a very basic role in our economy. I wanted to get in a little bit into what your recent expertise in the digital economy. Is there anything in particular in Jordan or elsewhere in the region that might be having an impact, perhaps in terms of hardware or technology, or even the use of platforms?
Well, definitely there are some shift towards some Chinese products, but I personally believe that this is where the Americans should focus on creating more interdependency between the consumers and the producers. We should not be only looked at as consumers. We're good contributors to the global supply chain. I mean, in Jordan, there are maybe a couple of thousand that work for Amazon, few hundreds for Microsoft, more than 1,000 for Cisco, hundreds for Expedia. So we've managed to deliver when we were tested. Even during COVID, when the whole universe was being blocked, we worked from home and delivered quality services to the global consumers, the global customers of those companies. And this makes it more imminent to bring more value to be created in this part of the world to make it harder for people to let go of those products. I mean, instead of just asking us to use the products, we could also contribute in building them. Data centers built in Jordan for the region. That could be something very important to maintain the sales in Jordan and in the region. Manufacturing, I mean, OEM manufacturing, electronics manufacturing. We're a free trade country, and we've had those agreements with the US, with EU, with Singapore, Canada, UK. So we are a destination where you could rely on our abundant talent, cost-efficient labor, cost-efficient energy, and resilient energy, and free trade agreements and geographical position, and also the 27% renewable out of our overall energy production. So anybody who wants to get to net zero by 2050 can come to Jordan and benefit from that. By doing that, you make it much harder for us to let go and go to the Chinese. But without looking us as producers and contributors to the value chain of the American products, I mean, what would stop any consumer from buying Chinese instead of buying Americans those days? Nothing. They need to feel their interest. There should be a mutual interest both ways. And I believe we provide a very good interest to the American business. Believe me, Jeff Bezos is not here for charity or Satya or whoever. They don't come for charity. They come because they could find value in the local engineering talent that's providing them with great value at a cost-efficient model. So use us more so we could feel that we're not only being considered as consumers and we can shift our consumer behavior towards somewhere else.
So your message to companies is, I know that there's been success there, companies opening business processing outsourcing hubs, for example, in Jordan, that they should continue down that path.
Definitely, definitely, and it's working, and I mean, their business is going very well as we speak. With the war next to us, we managed to serve them. Well, next door, the engineers were called for service. So we're more resilient here, and it's more safe to hire in Jordan than anywhere else.
So products are still being moved and made and value being created for American businesses in Jordan, even despite all of
Yes.
the conflict going on in the north and the
Yep.
south of the region right now.
Yes. So
And
we need to do more of that instead of just looking at this part of the world as consumers.
right, yeah, so consumers, but also partners in the production of, and hopefully the better integration of, some of these brands and services into the region. Um,
Yep.
but just on a little bit more of a specific note, some of the recent, for example, undersea cable projects that are coming to the region, many go through Egypt right now. Some actually have been proposed to go through Israel to the Middle East. This was obviously concluded under the conditions of the Abraham Accords, under a completely different context in the region at the time. I know that the Aqaba Digital Hub is supposed to be a receiving end of some new cable projects. Do you think that the current conflict will have any downstream impacts on Jordan's attempts and interest in becoming more of a transit hub for some of that digital infrastructure?
The Blue cable for Google, which is coming from India to Europe through Aqaba, is a very important infrastructure for the universe. It's not only for us. And it's not under the Abraham Accords at all because it's running through Saudi, and Saudi did not sign the Abraham Accords. So it was not really linked to the Abraham Accords. It's geography. And Google is an international company that choose to go through Israel. It's not a Jordanian cable per se to decide that it's going to stop or not. It's an international cable connected to other European companies, and I don't think it's going to be impacted or stopped by any means. I mean, technology uh, has been usually crossing borders at the times of wars. And unfortunately, the people in Gaza are not having any internet connectivity or telecom, while we're just more worried about an expansion of a project, which we were proud of. But there are people who are not even receiving any ability to call the 911 if there is any 911 there. So I don't think it's going to be impacted, but let's see. It's going as per schedule, and it's a great project for humanity, whether it's passing through Israel or passing through any other country. It's a good project. It's a Google project. It's not my project, so it's gonna be like everybody is using Google or using Microsoft, and Google and Microsoft are in Israel. It's a more complicated story than McDonald's or Starbucks.
Right. There are many, many more countries that have signed on and have interest in the completion of this project and others. So it will, sounds like it'll likely continue. Um, so I wanted to ask my last question is, so Jordan has an interest in peace and security. This current conflict affects Jordan uniquely, in its security environment. How can a peaceful conclusion to this conflict really help the economic situation in Jordan and its neighboring countries? What are the primary things on the table that are going to take place if we can come to a resolution?
Well, I think His Majesty made it clear for years now that without a fair solution, there is nobody who's calling for peace more than Jordan in the region for the last, I don't know how many years. But peace comes with dignity, peace with people getting their fair rights according to international law. If that doesn't happen, it's not peace. And that's unfortunately what has been done for the last 20, 30 years. We're calling for peace. We're promising the people with peace, but we're putting them in a cage. That doesn't work. Yes, we need a conclusion, and that conclusion needs to be fair to the Palestinians, to allow justice and to allow a safe life for everybody in the region. It doesn't work without a policy shift globally that understands that what has been done is a violation of human rights. It's a violation of the international law. It's a war crime that needs to stop. That's our country's leadership position. It's my position, and it's everybody's position. Yes, we want economic prosperity, but it doesn't happen that simply. It's not a push button that you press and it works. People, while they feel they're not being treated as equal humans to the rest of the world, we're not blonde, unfortunately, but we're smart people who can deliver, who can work very hardly and contribute. And we have contributed to the global economy and to the global know-how from thousands of years. We need to make sure that there is peace that guarantees dignity and rights for the Palestinian people and for the Jordanians and for the Lebanese and the Syrians and the Egyptians who are around this war zone. If that doesn't happen, I don't think there will ever be prosperity or economic stability in the region.
If we can achieve peace with dignity, as you say, um, what kind of vision of prosperity can we expect? What are the things that we're unable to achieve, that are being held back because we don't have that solution?
I don't think I can answer this question now. I need to stop seeing blood in the streets, then we talk.
Right, right. Um, do you have any final words for the audience?
Oh, I personally believe there is a huge opportunity for us in the region in integration to the US economy, to the American businesses. We believe there's a lot that we can do. There is a lot of unrealized potential because of the lack of talent, the lack of opportunities that we can provide. We have the highest number of engineers per capita on earth, but we will need an opportunity to be partners to allow us to contribute, and that cannot be done without respect and shared values. And I believe that the values we announce are the same. We just need to see the same execution of values for all humans from all races.
Mothanna Gharaibeh, thank you once again for joining the Wilson Center and having this important discussion.
Thank you. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Wilson Center.